Have you looked into at all the debates of, meat is the number one cause of climate change and it's ruining our environment? You
Yeah.
get that a lot from the plant-based side
Yeah.
of
Well, I mean,
things.
that's the data doesn't support that assertion. Yeah. Does does the production of animal products have an impact on the environment? Of course it does. Everything does, right? But is that impact, does it overshadow its benefit? And I would argue clearly it doesn't. One of the things I like to talk about is, well, we'll say that a pound of meat causes this much greenhouse gas, whereas a pound of beans only causes this much greenhouse gas, or not even a pound, but calories. They'll say like, you know, 500 calories of this is meat and 500 calories of beans is this. But but when you start looking at it, it was like, what are those calories made out of? Because one of the most environmentally friendly things to raise when it comes to just calories per greenhouse gas equivalent is sugar. So, I mean, if we wanted to take that, we could say, well, we just everybody eat sugar, right? And we would have really low carbon footprint if everybody just ate sugar. But what would happen to everybody? Well, everybody would be sick. We already got so many people who eat sugar. So when you start looking at what about critical nutrients? What about things like essential amino acids? And then all of a sudden, when you start comparing those things, they start to get closer and closer and closer. And so it's just the goalpost to decide to use. They're like, well, beef, because it uses, per calorie, it does this. But it's like, well, it's not about calories. It's about nutrition, right? That's why we eat. If we just wanted calories, like I said, we just eat sugar. The other thing is that, like for instance, in the United States where I live, and I think where you live, right? Um, Beef greenhouse gas emissions are 2% of our total country's emissions. So 2% is 2% worth it to feed our country the highest quality food possible? I think it is. And let's look at some other things. The hospital system, the healthcare system, is anywhere between 4 and 10%, depending on which study you look at. So when I put people on beef-based diets, I mean, they're no longer diabetic. They no longer have their Crohn's disease, their hypertension goes away, their metabolic syndrome goes away, their obesity goes away. They no longer need the hospital system, which is producing 10% of our greenhouse gases. And so you have to look at all the effects. You can't just say, oh, well, beef is this and we're going to cut it out. What would happen is if you cut out beef out of everybody's diet, the greenhouse gases would go somewhere else. They would go to other foods, transportation, increased hospital usage. And so the net effect would probably be actually the opposite, right? So you have to think, you just can't look at, one thing in isolation. You have to say, what's going to be the overall effect here? And yes, you could cut out greenhouse gas emissions from cows, but guess what? They would come somewhere, they would come from somewhere else. And you would have, in my view, and I think there's very good evidence to show this, a much more unhealthy population. And I think, the biggest threat to climate change, if you want to think anything is, and I know a lot of people think it's all hocus pocus and mumbo jumbo, but it's a bunch of sick people. I mean, this is the greatest threat to the world is a bunch of sick, unhealthy, mentally deranged people because, mental health ties very closely to physical health. And nutrition plays a role in both of those things. So, I mean, you got a malnourished population of people that are either chronically sick, they're crazy, they're depressed, they're lazy, they're stupid. That's a real problem.
And, I saw a crazy stat that it's like a third of all food that's manufactured in the world, might even be closer to like 50% at this point, goes to waste. When
Yeah, it's like
I feel
40.
like
I think,
it's
well,
like
yeah, 40% was what I saw. Is 40% of it food waste, and so
uh,
it's like, and most of that is fruits and vegetables and baked goods. By the way, I mean
right.
that's where most of the waste occurs. There's a little bit in the animal agricultural sector, but it's very little compared to this other stuff. And so that's another huge issue. And I have almost zero food waste because I mean I
You're not
also
leaving
say
any
so.
steak
Yeah,
behind. You're not
there's
throwing
nothing left
anything
behind, and
out.
no one in my family does. And if there's for some reason we can't eat it, the dog will eat it. I mean, it's like in my household, there's as close to zero waste as possible. I create a lot less trash. I spend a lot less energy cooking things. I spend a lot less on dishes. I spend a lot less trips to the grocery store. I mean, on and on and on. So it's actually quite economical in the grand scheme of things. It's actually quite minimally impactful on pollution and garbage and those types of things. So I mean, it's when you just isolate, like I said, one variable, you're missing the whole boat.